What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to human and sex trafficking survivor, thriver, and whistleblower, devoted wife and loving mother, social media content creator and survivor advocate, and someone I'm honored to call my new friend, Rachel. Rachel's journey into advocacy is rooted in a childhood marked by instability, long before the predators of the online world targeted her. Born into a home fractured by a controlling father and sustained by a devoted mother who navigated the chaos with unwavering love, Rachel developed the subtle vulnerabilities common to many children in dysfunctional environments. These early experiences, unpredictable dynamics, emotional turbulence, and a quest for stability, laid an invisible foundation that groomers would later exploit. Yet, even amidst the turmoil, Rachel harbored expansive dreams, envisioning a future as bright as the cosmos, with aspirations that reflected her innate potential for unyielding spirit. The pivotal chapter of Rachel's life unfolded during her teenage years, coinciding with the dawn of social media's widespread influence. Eager to be a part of this new dynamic of socialization, she created an account on MySpace, one of the era's pioneering platforms. Unaware of the lurking perils in this new digital landscape, Rachel connected with a seemingly supportive woman who offered mentorship and investment in her ambitions. In retrospect, this quote-unquote friend was a calculated recruiter for an online human trafficking network, preying on vulnerable young girls by dangling the allure of their dreams as bait. What began as innocent online interactions spiraled into a web of manipulation, blackmail, and coercion, trapping Rachel in a cycle of trafficking that exploited her insecurities and isolated her from escape. This grim reality underscores a chilling statistic. Predators increasingly use social media to groom victims, with reports of online enticement rising over 300% in recent years. Rachel's testimony is a stark, unflinching recount of horror, revealing the insidious duality of social media. On one hand, it's a vibrant escape, a tool for forging connections across distances, preserving memories, reuniting with loved ones, and disseminating ideas that inspire change. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and X enable creativity and community in ways unimaginable just a generation ago. Yet beneath this facade, a darker underbelly thrives. Predators, including pedophiles, traffickers, and abusers, operate from the anonymity of their screens, no longer needing physical proximity to hunt. Rachel's experience highlights how these threats evolve. Traffickers now employ sophisticated tactics like deepfake technology, encrypted chats, and algorithmic targeting to ensnare victims, often starting with flattery or promises that mask their intent. But from the ashes of her trauma, Rachel has risen as an indomitable warrior, transforming her pain into profound purpose. Embracing the irony of her testimony's origins, she returned to social media not as a victim, but as a vigilant advocate and educator. As a survivor, influencer, woman, and mother, she offers a multifaceted lens on these platforms' risks and rewards. On her Instagram account, where she has garnered a ton of amazing attention and loyal followers, she whistleblows on grooming tactics, shares her personal testimony to bring awareness, and equips parents with practical tools to safeguard their children. Inspirational in her authenticity, Rachel models a bold redefinition of influence, prioritizing impact over popularity. She humanizes the statistics, reminding us that behind every trafficking case is a person with dreams derailed but not destroyed. Her testimony is far more than a cautionary tale. It's a powerful testament to the unbreakable human spirit. What was meant to destroy her has instead forged her into a force for change, proving that even the deepest darkness can give birth to extraordinary light. She stands as living proof that redemption is possible, that one voice raised in courage can ignite thousands, and that every survivor who chooses to speak out becomes a part of a rising tide that will one day turn back the waves of exploitation. In Rachel, we see not just survival, but triumphant rebirth, a reminder that no matter how broken the beginning, the ending can be one of profound victory, purpose, and unyielding hope for a safer, more connected world. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, walking miracle, fierce mama bear, social media victim turned warrioress, anti-human trafficking advocate and educator, content creator, and a woman on a mission to expose and end online exploitation, the one, the only, Rachel. Rachel, it is an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
I'm
Even
so
with the circumstances they are.
I know these conversations are really hard, but I'm sure even just through what you've done on social media, you realize how needed these conversations are and how less alone it makes people feel. And it gives other people a voice and the courage to do the same thing you are, which is speaking out and bringing awareness. So I'm really grateful to have you on today. And I'm really grateful too that I found you on social media. I had a few people send me your profile online, and I got a couple tags in the comments of your videos that were going viral, which was really amazing to see. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, online social media, human sex trafficking. This is a topic not talked about enough from a survivor perspective, as well as a parental perspective of the online dangers being shared. And I just really loved your message and was really excited that you agreed to come on today, because I think this conversation is just not had enough. And I think that's why so many people are gravitating towards your profile, because we've been sort of groomed to think that social media is just all fun and games, which it can be, but beneath all that lies this hidden network of darkness that you know all too well, and that we have a lot to learn from you about. So I thought maybe we'd start. I outlined in the intro just a brief little excerpt about the environment that you grew up in, but I thought maybe you could just expand on that and share maybe a few things that created vulnerabilities in you that later on your exploiters saw and used against you.
Yeah, so honestly, I think one of the biggest things um, with my upbringing is my dad had a lot of his own struggles that he never really acknowledged before becoming a parent or even while a parent. And he was never abusive in any, sense of the way, like he never hit me, he never did anything like that. But he never gave me a voice. And you don't realize how important that is to give your daughter and to give your children until they need to use it. And I think especially like in the 90s, early 2000s, all of us growing up, we were taught much differently than the new generation is parenting. And one of the things was I'm just going to jump into it. Um, I had my first episode of being molested by a family friend when I was 4 and 5 years old. And there was one occasion that my dad walked into it. And my dad at this point had an opportunity to do something. And instead, I was the one that got in trouble. And I was told not to say anything, not to talk about it, never to bring it up. And it was just swept under the rug. And that was that. I still to this day don't think I've ever told my mom that story. Um, and that was one of the first times as a little girl where I learned, like, okay, you can't say anything. And that only escalated as I got older. And I was, at a friend's sleepover when I was 8 years old, and her older brother, we were sleeping on bunk beds, and her older brother was probably 14, 15, and he climbed in the top bunk with me and started to touch me. And the only thing I knew to do at the time was I literally completely rolled off the top bunk just straight to the floor because I didn't know what else to do. And it was nighttime, everyone was sleeping. That was really all I felt I could do in the moment. Never told anyone, never said anything, because again, after the first time it happened and my dad knew about it, he was like, we don't say anything. So I was like, okay, I don't say anything. And then when I was 13, well, before I was 13, so we moved, my dad, he grew up in the foster care system, very financially not well. And he hit it really big when I was in like fifth, sixth grade. He figured out how to make money and he made a lot of it very quickly. And it completely consumed him. Once we got to that high society level, um, he was so obsessed with it that he cared more about how our family was seen versus what was actually happening in our house. And that's where things really started taking a turn. And we were taught, very like, you do what you're told. You do what you're told, you do what you're told, you do what you're told. We would go, my dad would specifically take me to, events and stuff with him. And these older gentlemen that he worked with or did jobs with or, whichever. I was like 13, 14 years old at this point, and they would call me jailbreak, or they would be like, I can't wait till you're 18. And my dad would just sit there and not say anything. And he allowed it to happen. And I just, one thing after another just kept being sexualized since a little girl. And it just never stopped once it started. And I ended up losing my virginity by being raped by two guys I went to school with. And it would have been more, but when those two guys were doing what they were doing, a third boy walked up to the door and he was like, I'm next. And I looked at him and I was like, please no. I'm like, I don't. I'm like, please no. And he was the first one that listened. And that is the only reason it did not escalate into more. Um, and I was 13. These boys were 14, 15. They weren't much older than me. And I think there's a common misconception around children and them being molested or raped or anything that everyone assumes it's adults. And there are so many kid on kid scenarios, most likely due to the fact that that child is probably being molested by someone else. There's that old saying, hurt people hurt people. But again, after this happened, I didn't feel like I had a voice. And so I didn't say anything to anyone, but the boys did. And I very quickly developed a reputation around the school. Um, and this is when social media was just like, Facebook had just came out at this point now. MySpace was like starting to become a thing. And so I would go online, and the next 4 years of high school were really rough. I was suicidal at one point, tried to commit suicide. That is when my parents sent me away, which I'm sure you've seen on Netflix now. Actually, there's a bunch of documentaries that have come out about the wilderness camps and the therapeutic boarding schools that a bunch of kids got sent to. So I went to the wilderness camp I went to was called Seuss. And it was in Idaho. They have them all over the country. The one I went to was in Idaho. And I will say, this wilderness program that I went to, I never experienced anything abusive. It was very gnarly, very, very gnarly. And to this day, I can still make a fire with sticks. And I am like, it's like my cool mom trick I have with my boys. I'm like, you guys, mom has a lot of survival skills you don't know about. And so it's one of those, it's like one of the things where I'm like, you know what, that 40 days, I was in Idaho, in the hills of Idaho for 40 days with nothing except one pair of clothes, one pair of like long underwear, and then we had like a backpack with all of our gear in it and a tarp. And we would hike anywhere from 5 to 7 miles a day around the hills of Idaho. And we would like we literally were thrown into survival mode, like literal survival mode. And we had two guides, and they were like, figure it out. And they would teach us. Obviously, the guides knew what they were doing, and they would teach us all these things. And the first like 2 weeks I was into it, I really struggled, but then I fully embraced it, and I was all in. I became full on wilderness woman out there. And when it was time to leave, I almost didn't want to leave. I was like, I kind of like this better. Like, people are nice to me out here versus back home. And when I was at Seuss, it was the first time I even acknowledged that I had been molested or raped. Because up until this moment, I put all the accountability on myself. I was like, well, I went to the house, I was wearing a skirt, I put all the blame on me. And I was talking to a therapist because they did do a lot. They would send a therapist out like once a week to check on all the kids. And he asked me, he's like, so are you sexually active? And I was like, well, kind of. And he asked me about how I lost my virginity, and I went through the story with him. And he looked at me and he was like, you were raped. And I was like, no, no. I was like, I didn't fight. I didn't punch him. I was like, I'm like, I kind of just froze. I'm like, but I didn't do more. And the therapist was like, did you tell them no? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, okay. And he had to like really break it down for me. And when I left the wilderness camp, I was sent to an all-girl boarding school, which was called Spring Ridge Academy, which if you do a little Google search, they have been in a few lawsuits for the abuse that happens there. That was 3 months of absolute hell. Um, I literally begged my parents to come home every single phone call we had. And the boarding school would be like, no, everyone does this. Everyone does this. There were all kinds of crazy rules. But at the end of the day, the one thing they drilled in us is you have to submit. And at this boarding school, you had to submit to survive. Like, if you did not submit, like, you didn't want to know what was going to happen to you if you didn't submit to the rules that they were forcing. Like, you couldn't go to the bathroom without permission. You couldn't talk to the girl next to you without permission. You couldn't leave your room without permission. You couldn't shave your legs. You couldn't, like, it was incredibly strict. When you show up, they make you get completely naked. They do like a full cavity search of your entire body. Like, and I'm 14 years old. Like, I it was a really interesting place. But I look back at my history and I'm like, no wonder I was groomed on MySpace. Like, I wanted to feel accepted and loved by just anyone at this point. And so my parents came out about 3 months into the boarding school for like a family night. And my mom immediately was like, something is very off here. And she came and got me a week later and pulled me out. And she was like, yeah, no, because it's a 2 to 3 year program usually. And when my mom did the parent night, she was like, this therapy we're doing is really odd. Like, they put us down in a basement and they would do these super weird like therapy. I don't know what I'm looking for. Like therapy tactics, I guess, to like get stuff out. And it was just very odd, very cultish, very, very interesting. Um, Again, if you Google Spring Ridge Academy in Spring Valley, Arizona, there is all kinds of fun stuff on them if you ever want to go do a dive. They recently, I think it was like 2 years ago, they paid out a $2.5 million lawsuit over abuse that happened there. So when I get home, one of the things that these places make you do is like, if you're overweight, they restrict food. And if you're underweight, they force you to overeat to gain weight. And when I went there, I was underweight. So they did a lot of force feeding. And when I came home, I had a little more weight on me than I normally did. And then that started a lot of talk around the town of how like I was chubby and I wasn't hot anymore. And there was all this other sort of rumors going on top of being, a slut, a whore. Um, I had messages on Facebook every single day from girls who were like, kill yourself. And now I had people who were overanalyzing my body down to a T because I had put on weight. So I developed a really bad eating disorder and I became bulimic. And that lasted for about, so it started when I was 15 and I finally really got over it when I was like 25. It took a long, it became something I did out of stress, and it became almost like a coping. Like if I was having a super stressful day, um, I would make myself throw up, and that was how I like got my stress out. And so again, fast forward a few years, a lot more happens. I'm like, I don't know how many, like, I don't know how many details I'm supposed to get into right now. Um, but I think another important thing to bring up is another time I really lost my voice, and I'm not super huge in faith. I'm working on it. It's something I've been trying to get more into. But when I was 17, I ended up getting pregnant. And oh boy, like my dad was not about to have a teenage daughter in high school having a baby because that would destroy the family's reputation. Is literally his exact words was, it's going to ruin my business and it's going to ruin the family. Um my mom wanted me to keep the baby. She was like, you can keep it and give it up to adoption. She had a friend who had been trying for a baby for a long time. She's like, this could be a gift for them. She was trying every other avenue. And my dad ultimately was like, nope, you're going to Planned Parenthood and you're getting rid of it. And I didn't want to get rid of it. I didn't want to put the baby up for adoption. I didn't want to do either. And I was forced to. I didn't have a choice. I was 17 years old. Like, I didn't know, like, what was I going to do? Like, I was very financially dependent on my family. And, outside of having like a little job at Hollister on the weekends, where I worked like 4 hours a week or what, like, I, I was taught like you do what you're told. And so I had to go through that, which absolutely killed my mom because as much as I didn't have a voice, my mom didn't have a voice. And we knew my parents weren't happy. We didn't know what to extent they weren't happy. Um, and then after that, my senior year of high school, um, my parents put me into I was a debutante. So supposedly it's like a charity, right? That they say. And it's 12 girls that are picked in the community. And essentially they put you in a wedding dress, you have a big ball, and you are presented to society to marry because you are of age. Um, and so I had that, which looking back, I'm like, that's a really weird thing to do. At the time, we were just like excited to dress up, but when you look back at it, you're like, why do you have your 18-year-old daughter in a wedding dress at a ball in front of a bunch of very wealthy men? Like, it's weird. Um, but I think, this quick tidbit of my upbringing kind of gives a good idea of how I got to where I got to. So I'm on MySpace. Oh, I got backtrack a little bit. So I'm on MySpace. So actually the debutante ball, I was 17 because I graduated in June of 2008 and I turned 18 May 10th. So I'm May 10th. So I turned 18. So I was 17 when the ball came out. Yeah. It was March of 2008. So it was right before I turned 18. And I had the abortion in December of 2007 was when that occurred. So just quick timeline. So it was very quickly like, we get rid of the baby. Okay, now we're going to move on to this. So I never really got a chance to like grieve or, I had to just move on. And then I get a message one day on MySpace from this very pretty blonde lady. And it was around the time of March, April, I want to say. And she sends me a message and she's just like, hey, how are you? Just, and she was, I want to say her age was like 23 on her page, but she was very pretty, very, young blonde. Like, why would I be concerned about her? We were always taught that it was creepy men to be afraid of. You didn't have to be afraid of women, like women don't do anything, right?
And
Is
even
what
like stranger danger, where it's like it's going to be somebody that jumps down and attacks you, not somebody that's
yeah,
like, hey,
exactly.
how are
Yeah,
you?
100%. And, she tells me how she has a modeling agency. And she's like, oh, I came across your profile. And she's like, you have the perfect look of what I'm looking for. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, I'm off to college, because I planned to go to college. And I'm like, well, I'm off to college. And she's like, okay, well, let's just keep in touch. And, so we started talking. And it was very basic conversation in the beginning. So my goal was to be a news anchor. And that's what I wanted to do. And so when I went to college, my degree was communications with a minor in poli-sci. And about 2 months into college, I find out that you actually don't need a degree to be a news anchor. You just need to get an internship with the right news station. So I decided to drop out. And so I didn't even make it a full semester. So I dropped out and I go to my dad and I'm like, this is what I want to do. And he's like, nope, you need to go to college for business, apply for business stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. And he's like, well, I'm not going to financially support any other option. And so I was like, okay. I was like, well, what about, FITM, the Fashion Institute? What if I went and like created my own business making wedding dresses? Like I've always been really creative. I love to draw. That could be something I could pursue. FITM is very hard to get into. You have to do a whole portfolio. It's a whole process. You have to go through interviews. So I did it. I sat down, I created a portfolio, I put all the work in, I did all the interviews, and the final interview involves bringing a parent. And my dad came with me. And all while this is happening, this woman and I, her name is Roxy, we're messaging back and forth, right? Just everyday things, getting to know each other. She asks me about my relationship with my parents, and I don't even think twice about it at this point. She's just someone I'm talking to, and I enjoyed talking to her. Like she became a good friend. When I had a bad day, I would tell her about my day. Um, so we go to FITM, we do the FITM interview, and we're on the drive home, and my dad's like, "This is a stupid dream. I'm not going to pay for it." He's like, "You need to go into business." He's like, "This school's a scam. It's not going to take you anywhere." And he's like, "I'm not doing it." So I'm like, okay, well, how am I going to pay for a school that's $90,000 a year when I can't get any sort of funding because my parents make too much money? And then on top of it, I didn't know what was available like to do. And then my mom, she had an in with E! News, and my mom got me an interview with Dana Devon with E! Network, and it went great. They went through the whole internship process with me, and I had an internship opportunity with E! News to be a news anchor after it. And it's like a 6-month internship, but that required me moving to Burbank and needing 6 months of financials to cover rent and all that stuff while I'm going through it. Again, my dad's like, I'm not paying for that. So I'm now like, what am I going to do? Like, I left college. I have 2 great opportunities in front of me, but I have no way to pay for them. And I'm telling her this, and she's like, well, she's like, you could cut bottle for me and you can make a lot of money. She's like, this is how you could do it. And at this point, I was like, yeah, I might as well. Like, why not? I was like, my dad doesn't want me to be a model, but if it affords me to do this, like, yeah, maybe I will go be independent, because she pushed that on me. She's like, you can be independent. You can make your own money. You don't need your dad. You don't need your family. Like, they're not there for you right now. They don't believe in you. And she saw my need that I had, and she grabbed onto my need and she ran with it. She gave me every piece of validation that I needed to hear in that moment. And that was it. Um, she invited me to her studio. Um, and I went. And when I got there, she was like, okay, I need you to get naked. And I was like, well, that's kind of odd. I was like, why would I need to get naked for headshots? And I was like, why? And she's like, oh, well, directors, if you ever do any like movies where there's like a nude scene, um, she's like, they need to see everything and what you look like. And so in my mind, as a 18-year-old girl who knows nothing about Hollywood at all, I was like, oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, and so I did it. And when I left, I called my best friend at the time and I was like, hey, I just did this. It was really weird and like kind of uncomfortable. And my friend was like, that's not normal. She's like, I don't think anyone does that in Hollywood. And I was like, no, I trust her. I'm like, she's going to help me make enough money so I can take this internship. And I'm like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And my friend's like, no, this is a big deal. And I'm like, no, I trust her, like fully trust her. And so I get home, and within a couple hours, my mom pulls me aside and she's like, what is, like, you did a naked photo shoot? And I was like, yeah. I was like, Mom, they were just headshots. Like, it's not a big deal. And my mom's like, yeah, she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, Mom, this lady told me I'm going to make much money modeling. And like tomorrow I have a fitness shoot already. Like, she already got me a fitness shoot tomorrow, and they're paying me $1,000 for this fitness shoot. That was the only thing in my mind was, oh, she put my headshot out and I got a fitness shoot immediately within literally an hour of her putting my picture out there. And so my main thing was like, I need to get to that photo shoot so I can make money, so I can start saving, so I can take this internship. My mom's like, we need to tell your dad about this. And I'm like, don't tell dad. And she's like, we need to tell dad. And so she tells my dad. And my dad grabbed his gun and he was like, you are not my daughter. And my mom at that point she went into a mode of like, I need to get my daughter out of this situation as quick as possible. I still to this day don't know what happened after I left. But that night they kicked me out of the house. Uh, they kept my phone. I had a suitcase with a handful of clothes, and that was it. It was about 9 o'clock at night when they kicked me out. Literally threw me on the street with nothing but a suitcase, no car, no money, nothing. And so my thing was, I need to get to this shoot tomorrow. Like, come hell or high water, I need to make that $1,000. And I was like, so I can at least get a phone and figure out somewhere to live. So I had a friend that lived nearby. I walked to their house. I used his phone to call the agent. I was able to set up a ride to get to the shoot in the morning. I show up to the address that was provided, and it's at this very 80s style white mansion. And I walk in, and it's just like white leather furniture everywhere, colorful pillows. And I was like, oh, this is a cool setup. Like, it was very different kind of vibe than like I've ever seen in a house before. And I meet the director and the photographer, and they were very friendly. They were like, oh, here's your media releases. We need your ID, da da da. We did all the formalities. And then they gave me the wardrobe. Like, they had it all picked out. And it was a little odd. I was like, huh. So they gave me, whenever it was a purple tank top with like the lace bottom, like the one that to and Hollister and Abercrombie used to sell, that like everyone layered on top of each other. They gave me one of those. And then they gave me these bright yellow sparkly leggings. And then a hot pink belt. And then they put barrettes in my hair, like little girl baby barrettes, like very colorful yellow ones. And then they gave me like beaded kid jewelry. It was very colorful. And I was like, oh, this is really weird. I'm like, this is interesting. And I'm just like, who are we shooting for? You know, and this man walks in, and they were like, oh, the other talent is here. And I'm like, talent for what? Like, what is he doing here? And they look at me and they're like, oh, you're going to have sex with him. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I was under the impression I'm just doing some photos in workout stuff today. Some like cute photos for workout. And he was like, yeah, you're in your workout stuff, but you're going to take it off and you're going to have sex with him. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And the guy who I was supposed to be having sex with, he was like, don't worry about it. I'll be super nice. I'll be really gentle. Like, he's like, I'll just tell you what to do the whole time. And I'm like, no, this isn't what I don't want to do this. I'm like, I want to leave. I don't want to do this. And the director looked at me dead in the face, and he was like, if you leave, we are going to charge you $1,000 for canceling. And we're going to take you to court and sue you because you're at breach of contract because you've already signed this paper when you got here. And I'm like, I need to call my agent because this isn't right. I was like, maybe I'm at the wrong house. Like, I don't know. Maybe I got the address wrong. So I call her, and she's like, oh, don't worry about it. She's like, this happens all the time. She's like, you're going to make way more money this way. And I was like, I look like I'm like a 13-year-old girl right now. I'm like, this is really awkward. I'm like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't like how I look. This is uncomfortable. And she was like, look, she's like, what you're doing right now, she's like, you're actually like helping other little girls, because if you don't do this, then the men who like this are going to go and try to find little girls. And I was like, okay, so it's me or them. And I was like, if I leave, I'm going to get sued. I'm going to get fined. I have no phone to call anyone outside of the director letting me call my agent. I had no car to go anywhere. I didn't know where I was. I was in this random neighborhood. Like, if I was to run where was I going to go? What was I going to do? So I went into, you do what you're told and you submit. And that's what I did.
And then it's
And
like, what would they do to you even? You don't know who has weapons on them. You're with these men that you don't know. You're a young girl. I mean, be terrifying.
I had no idea what to do. My only thing at that point was do what I need to do to get out of this house as quickly as possible, and then I'll figure it out. And I was like, at least I'll walk away with some money. Because then I can like get a phone and figure something out. So I performed what they wanted me to do. And at the end of it, I just left the house and was like, I need to figure out a ride to get somewhere. And at the end of it, I asked the guy who I had to have sex with, I was like, hey, can I use your phone to call a friend to pick me up? And he was like, sure. So I called a friend. They picked me up. And I was like, I need you to take me to the store to get a phone. And so I had this $1,000 check. And no, I had to go. So I had this $1,000 check. I had to pay my agent 20%. And then the government taxes you on top of it. So 40% of that check was immediately gone for government taxes and my agent, which, yes, the government is legally taxing all of this. Because the thing about having the adult industry become legal like it has, what people don't realize is anyone, anyone, any, literally anyone can go online, create an LLC, deem that they're going to be filming adult content, and then now they have access to every single modeling agency where they can pick whatever girl they want, have them come over to their house, and legally traffic them. And there's nothing anyone can do. Nobody can do a thing. Because there's media releases. They dot every T, or they dot every I, cross every T. Like, these people are extremely calculated. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly who they want, and they know exactly how to get that person to where they want them to go. And something that terrifies me the most about these Epstein files that have come out, which I'm kind of put this together right now. Nothing I've seen has been tied to Epstein so far, but these people who used Epstein to get to these girls are no different than these men who have these fetishes of being with young women, young girls, where, they're creating these LLCs and getting young girls to their house to have sex with them and film it. And essentially they're creating their own content, a lot of them. There were lots of homes I ended up going to where it was just a man and a camera, like a handheld camera that like your parents used to like film your birthdays. And you don't know where you're going or where you're going to show up to. But the problem is once you're in, like, you don't really know what to do at that point. And when I left, I did eventually get a phone, but then I was like, who am I going to call? My dad made sure to let everybody in the family know, extended family, everyone, like, you are not to talk to Rachel. If you do, I will not financially provide anything for you. I was completely outcasted. I had nobody to call or go to. And so I was like, I felt very stuck. I felt very trapped. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. And that's where, I just I was like, shit, I just need to make enough money at this point to get out. And she told me, she was like, look, she's like, you're never going to have to work with anyone you don't want to work with. You know, she's like, if you're ever uncomfortable, like, I'll make sure to handle it and take care of it. She's like, just do a couple of these and then we'll get you into some other stuff. And like, she got me into a position where I needed her financially. But then she never worked me enough to where I could get my head above water.
And at this point too, she had began a friendship with you. So she, in your mind, likely wasn't at this point a predator. She was still somebody that you trusted, somebody that you could confide in, somebody that was there for you. And so it probably didn't seem at that point that she was doing anything wrong to you. She was still helping you at this point keep your head up above water, when in fact she's actually trafficking you.
Yes. And in the moment, I didn't even realize what was happening. And so she was like, just do a couple more of these. She's like, it's fine. Like, she's like, don't think about it too much. She's like, you'll make a lot more money. Well, she would set me up working like 4 days in a row. So by the 5th day, I could barely walk. My body was destroyed. I was swollen in places you should never be swollen. And every time it was the same thing. It was dress me up as little as possible, as young as possible. And I never knew what I was going to walk into. And it got to a point where I was like, I need to get out of this. Like, I can't keep doing this. But I also was like, I don't know who to call or who to reach out to. And I didn't want to tell anybody either. Like, I kind of at that point where, like, you know what, I'm just gonna like find the best in this. I'm gonna try to find the positive side of this. And I kept trying to stay positive throughout it. And this went on for a total of 8 months. And again, I never made enough money to go. And I would be so physically drained, physically beat up from these men I had to be with. And I would have to find rooms for rent because all I could afford was like $500 a month at this point. And so she would send me Craigslist ads. And she'd be like, oh, here, I found one for you. So like she had her hand in everything I did. She had her hand in people she introduced me to. She's like, oh, you should hang out with them this weekend. You'll have fun with them. And then I would hang out with them. I would end up getting drugged. I got very heavily into drinking because it was the only way to really like get through a lot of this. Is I realized, like, you know, I have this level of drunk where like I could just completely disconnect from my body. And it was like a whole other person. And I think one of the worst parts of this is these people who do this, they make you record pre-videos. And in these pre-videos, they give you like a script of what to say. And they want you to act super bubbly and excited and that you're like begging for this man to be with you. And I think that was harder than the actual act. Because when it came to the act, I could like tune out, disconnect from myself.
It's traumatic thinking of this, and I can't even imagine like how demoralizing that would be to have to do that, especially when you're already like feeling so broken, feeling so betrayed. You had just gone through even like the abortion not too long before that, had no time to grieve, and it's just been like one thing after another, and you have no voice. Like there's nobody that's like stepping up to help you out of these situations. You're swimming through these drowning situations over and over and over again, and just being beat down more and more and more.
And you just want to get out and you don't
Yeah.
feel like you can. And I think a big part of it is I was taught growing up, like, you submit, that's what you do. And so for me, I went into, I'm going to submit to survive. And I'm just going to keep going until I have enough money to buy a car and drive wherever the hell I need to drive. And I ended up, she called me one time, and this was towards like a few months into it. And she's like, hey, there's this really cool party at the Playboy Mansion. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, this is how you're going to meet Hollywood directors. She's like, this is where the director is going to be. She's like, this is how you're going to get out and like you can become a news anchor by, one of the directors might be there. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, yes. Like she's finally doing this for me. And she kept doing that. She would like hold these carrots, right? And she'd be like, oh, you're almost there. You're almost there. Like it's here. And um we had to meet at an abandoned parking lot. All of us girls who went, it was like 20 of us, I want to say it was. And we all met at this abandoned parking lot and they loaded us up into a bus and we were bussed up to the Playboy Mansion, which I don't think many people realize it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like it's in a popular city, but it's also secluded. Um, so we get there, we get bussed in, we walk into the backyard, and I was like, we're walking in, there's like the pool in the front, and then off to the left, there's like a bunch of privacy cabanas. So like when they're closed, you can't see anything that's going on inside. And then there was like the dance floor area, but there was no DJ. They had just like basic music. And then there was all men, no other women except us, which I immediately was like, something's not right. And we walked up, and this guy came up to us, and they were like, hey, who wants to get naked, like fully nude, and get body painted? And a couple of the girls were like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. And I was like, is it mandatory? Like, do we have to? And he was like, well, we don't have to, but like we encourage it. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And within 10 minutes of being there, this gentleman comes up to me. He's probably 5'9", brown hair, overweight. And he's like, hey, I just got you for a tent. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I just paid them money and now you give me oral. And I'm like, what? I'm like, this was supposed to be like a networking party. Which at this point, I don't know why I trusted her or believed her. Like, I think I wanted, I don't think I wanted to admit what I knew. And I wanted, I think it just got to a point where I was like, I wanted her to not be who I thought. And I like kept trusting her because I was like, no, like I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there. I just need to trust her. Like this is how she does it. This is her process. And then on top of it, there was this other side to me that was like, it's you or these little girls. And I was like, I'd rather it be me. I'm like, if I have to do this and it keeps a few girls safe, like cool, I'll take it. And so that's where my head was this whole time, was like, I'm almost there. Like she's going to do it for me. It's going to happen. And then on the other side, it was like, okay, but I'm doing something good because I'm like protecting these little girls. So I'm at this party and I'm just like, uh, okay. I was like, I guess I have to perform this on this really disgusting overweight man that I want nothing to do with. And after that, I was like, okay, I need to get a game plan together because I don't want to do that the rest of this night. And one of the girls I knew, I was like, hey, this just happened. And she was like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." She's like, "I don't want to give anyone anything." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't either." So her and I essentially buddied up. And I was like, "Well, why don't we just convince them like to watch us make out? And maybe that will be enough to like make them not want us to do anything to them." And there was this room at the mansion that was like off to the side. So like when you were looking like at the pool where like the grotto is off to the side, on the other side there was like the house. And one of the gentlemen knew about a room that had bean bags in it. And he took us in there, me and this girl, and he took like two of his buddies, and they all took care of themselves while they watched her and I together. Because at the end of the day, her and I were like, if we have to be with anyone, I'd rather it be someone I feel at least safe with. And that party also had a lot of, there was about 10 to 12 NFL players from a very popular team. And I'm going to leave their team name out of it. But then I ended up, I was like, okay, I'm going to like go talk to people. And maybe if I'm like constantly talking to people, like I can get out of this. Because we couldn't leave. Like they bust us in. We didn't have anything. Like we had our phone, but like you can't call anyone to come. Excuse me. You can't call like you're at the Playboy mansion. Like I didn't know, no one knows the address, like unless you've been there. It's not and I think people forget because people think like the internet now. The internet in 2009 was not the internet that we have today. Like we still had Ask Jeeves that we searched things on. Like the information that was available back then is not the same as today. And so I start talking to one of the football players, and he was like, "So what's going on here?" And I was like, "Well, this is what I've learned so far." And he's like, "Oh," he goes, "I thought I was like just coming to a fun mansion party." He's like, "I didn't realize this was something else." And he's like, "Do you want to get out of here?" And he's like, "'Cause I want to get out of here." And I was like, 100% I want to get out of here. At this point, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen when I leave with you. But in my own head, I was like, you know what? At least you're attractive and you're not a gross old man. So I'm like, if I have to be with someone, I'll take it. And so I was like, we'll see what happens. So he brought me to his buddy's house. He was able to leave with me. Um, as far as I know, he had to pay for it. He had to give them money to take me. Um, and when we got to his buddy's house, he actually ended up being a total gentleman. And he was like, "You do not have to sleep with me." He's like, "If you want to sleep in a separate room, you can." And he was the reason I was able to get out of there that night. There are girls that went there that night that I never saw again. Um, I don't know what happened to them after the party. It was people I would see and then never saw. Um, so I don't know how that party ended or what happened after that party. Um, and then while I was doing all this, so a lot of these videos that I was having taken of myself, majority of them were never like, they were never like on Pornhub or any of that stuff. I don't know where they went or who they were for or what happened to them. I've never been able to find them. There's a few videos that were more traumatic than others that I have searched for. Um, as far as I know, they don't exist. Um, and she would fly me to other states for specific videos. Um, I went to Arizona. I went to Ohio. I went to Miami. And the first time I actually felt semi safe was I was on my flight to Miami. And one of the flight attendants, um, she was like coming around asking people for drinks and stuff or food and whatnot. And I was like, no, I don't have any money on me. Like, I can't get anything. Um, and she kind of, I don't know if it was like my persona or what, but this flight attendant had like a red flag moment. And she just kind of like stayed next to me most of the flight, asked me questions. She's kind of like brought me snacks. She's like, "What are you doing in Miami? Like, where are you going? Where are you staying?" And I think she had some sort of idea that I didn't want to be on that flight, but she couldn't like prove it. But at the end of the flight, you know, she was like, "Hey, like be safe." And when I was in Miami, um, I did one video and I met the guy that I was with. He decided that he really liked me. And he's like, I want you to stay in Miami. And so he ended up calling my agent and he was like, I want to give you and her, like, I want to pay her, a salary for her to just stay here with me. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I was like, I want to go back to California. And he respected my decision. My agent tried to talk me out of it. She was like, this is a great opportunity. You're going to make so much money. And I'm like, I don't want to stay here. And there was a part of me that I was like, well, if I do stay here, I could start over and like run off or, whatever the case may be. But then I was like, no, like I don't know anything about Miami. Like I need to just go back. So I get back to California and she's like, you know what? We need to get you a sugar daddy. And I'm like, what is a sugar daddy? And she's like, it's just someone who's going to take care of you financially. And she's like, you're not making as much money as we hoped. And she was like, why don't we just find a guy who can like pay for what you need? And I was like, what does that mean? And she was like, well, I'm going to set you up on a date. I'm like, okay. So I go on a date. I show up, and this guy is a surgeon of some sort. And he was probably in his mid 40s. And he was like, I'm looking for someone to breed. And he was like, you would essentially marry me, be my wife, and you will have 4 kids. He's like, you'll have 1 kid, like back to back to back. And he's like, I will give you $200,000 a year to be my wife and have my babies. And he's like, after you have the babies, he's like, we'll get your boobs done and we'll get your tummy tuck and I'll make sure you're always looking good. So when you have to show up to anything, like you look presentable. And that's what he wanted. And he, come to find out, my agent would get like a finder's fee if I like decided to go along with it. But this guy in particular, he was like, I don't want to force it. He's like, I want someone who sees this as a business deal and like is into it. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not into this. I'm like, I don't want to be bred for that. Um and I got an email from a guy who was someone who apparently saw my videos consistently. I don't know where, but he was a married man with kids. And I'm like, anybody at this point who ever came up to me and was like, oh, I've seen your video, I'm like, you're a pedophile. Like anybody who has seen me at this point, I'm like, you really need to question your morals because the stuff I did was very, very, very wrong. Um, And so he emailed me and I was like, you know what? Whatever at this point. So I emailed him back. We started having just very normal conversation, oddly enough. And he developed a level of attachment to me. And he asked me, like, hey, how did you get into this line of work? I was like, well, I don't want to be doing this. I'm like, I'm only here until I can make enough money to buy a car so I can get out. And after talking for a little bit, he was like, I'm going to send you a check for $10,000 to buy a car. He's like, he's like, I see you like my daughter now, which made it even worse. I was like, don't want to know what's happening at this man's house. But I was like, whatever. I gave him my home address. I was like, honestly, at this point, if someone showed up and murdered me, they'd be doing me a favor. And I got to a point in during all this where I completely emotionally gave up. I was like, I'm just gonna get through this. And I didn't see an end in sight at this point. I was like, I'm never gonna get out of this. Like, she's gonna keep me in this forever. I'm like, there's no way out. There's no escape. And I was on Craigslist because back in the day, this is where you looked for jobs. I was on like normal jobs. I was on Craigslist every day trying to find anything. But when I would like have a conversation over the phone, they're like, so what do you currently do for work? And I'm like, I don't really have a resume. And I'm like, how do you explain this to somebody in an interview, your situation? And they're like, do you have a reliable car? And I'm like, no, I don't have a car. And people don't realize how hard it is to get hired when you don't have a car. And this is back before Uber or anything. Like, the only option was a taxi or a friend who had a car. You can't rent a car in the state of California until you're 25. Like, I couldn't rent a car. It was taxis or it was rides from whoever I could bum a ride from. And I was currently where I was at, I was about an hour and a half drive to my parents' house. So I wasn't far, but I was too far at the same time. And this whole timeline was about 8 months long. And the day I received that check, I called a buddy and I was like, hey, can you drop me off at a dealership? Drop me off. I handed the dealership a check. I was like, I need a car. And I went to probably the shadiest dealership in LA that you could possibly go to because it was just the first one we found. And I got in that car and I called my mom. And I don't know if it's because like so much time had lapsed. My mom was just like, I'm gonna do everything in my power to have my daughter home. Um, but she was like, come meet me. And so her and I met up and we connected. She never asked what happened. I think at this point she was like, I don't want to know. I just want you home. And my dad did not want me home. He was like, she will not be in this house. And that's where my mom was like, yeah, no, you can F right off. She's going to be in this house. And she was like, you're going to deal with it. And so when I got back home, I completely blocked this lady on everything. As far as she knows, like I fell off the face of the earth. Like I completely went ghost on her because I didn't know what else to do. And I was at home and I got a phone call from a random man. And this was like 2, 3 days after. And he's like, hey, you don't know me, but I'm calling you because there's currently a thread online, and it wasn't Reddit, but it was like a Reddit thread. Reddit is the best example I could give of what this is. It was essentially like an off-brand Reddit site. And he was like, there is currently a bunch of men who are bidding on raping and murdering you, and your home address is posted and your phone number is on there. That's how I got your phone number. And he goes, I just wanted to let you know. He's like, I just stumbled on this randomly. I don't know how stumbled on it, and he's like, but I need to give you a heads up because I don't think you're safe. So we took this to the police station. We printed out the thread, took it to the police station, filed a report, talked about everything I had just gone through um, with one of the police officers, and they filed it in a box and never heard of it again. So we had to go to the thread itself, and we had to report it every single day, multiple times a day until it got taken down. And at this point, I was like, I can't stay here because I'm putting my little sister in danger. And so I ended up moving down to San Diego because I had an aunt who lives down here, and she was like, you can come stay with me. And so I moved down here, moved down to San Diego, and that's kind of what brought me down. And I was mentally in a very, very rough place. But all I wanted, all I wanted was to just feel any sort of love from anyone. Anyone. Like, I was a very easy target coming out of this. If you were just semi nice to me, I would cling on to you. Because at the end of the day, I was like, well, they're not forcing me to have sex with them, so they're not a bad guy. The ways I justified people's actions for the next 10, 12 years of my life were, you know what? They're not forcing me to have sex with them, so I'm okay. I'm all right. And I dealt with some very rough things in relationships after that because of that, and had some rough relationships when I got out. But now, fast forward all this time, I'm now 35. It's been 17 something years. And one of the reasons, like, I have people who are like, why are you talking about this now? And one of the reasons is I have taken all of the blame, all of the accountability onto myself because I was like, look, I went to that shoot and, I didn't fight back. I didn't punch anyone. I didn't run away. And like, I could have done more to get out, like looking back. But in the moment, I just would freeze and I didn't know what to do. And, they just constantly like, were like, we're going to sue you if you don't do this. We're going to fine you if you don't do this. And I didn't know I had my rights. I didn't know the laws. I didn't know any of that. Like, I started at 18, finished at 19. Like, I didn't know. Like, you are not an adult at 18 and 19. And anybody who says you are lying to yourself because they are not. Like, you are still a little girl when you're 18, 19. And you don't know the world and you don't know how the world works. And I think a lot of people put pressure on, the younger generation to like hop out of high school and jump into success and all these things when really like you're still figuring out yourself. You're still figuring out life. You're still figuring out how things work. And for me, I I knew how to submit. That's all I knew how to do. That was what I was ingrained into my mind being brought up in my house. It was you do what you're told, you submit. And so that's like when I was in a bad position, that's what I did because I was like that. I don't know what else to do. I was never taught to fight. I was never taught to say no. I was never taught to fight back. I was never taught that I had a voice. I was never taught that like my body is special and mine. Um I I never had self worth. I never had self respect. I never had any of that. I was the perfect target for a groomer. I wanted acceptance. I wanted love. I wanted to be successful. I wanted independence. And to kind of just wrap this up for today is with all of this, you know, these groomers and these traffickers, they are very calculated and they are very manipulative, and they will follow you for years before they message you. And now with social media going the way it is, I have really found a need to start talking about this because I see how vulnerable our kids are and our girls and our teens, how they're all on these public accounts. The little girls have public accounts and the mom's like, oh, I run it. But these people know that the kid is eventually going to take over their account. And now this groomer, this trafficker has 5-10 years of information. And to tie back to the Epstein files, Epstein was the one who was bringing these men, these little girls, because these men have a want for little girls. Just because Epstein is gone and these files are out does not mean that that want is gone. It just means they need to find a new way to get it. How do you guys think, how do you think they're going to find a new way to get it? It's social media is the easiest way to get it. And a lot of the parents who are publicly posting their kids, tagging the location, doing collaborations with resorts, hotels, airlines, it takes one groomer, one trafficker to watch a mom and be like, oh, okay, she always flies on this airline. She always goes to this hotel chain because she has a collab deal with them. They can very easily find out almost everything about you based on the collaborations you're doing, the locations you're tagging, and you're putting your kid out there for everyone to see and develop an attachment to. Like, I had a man who developed a full blown attachment with me through emails. And people will sit and tell me that, they don't need to be worried about posting their child. I'm like, you don't know what I know. You don't know what I've been through. You don't understand how dark it is out there. And how these people who once they find someone they want, they will take the time. They will do the pre-work. They will do everything they need to do to get to the person that they want. And they're not normal thinking people. These are people who look at a 4 or 5-year-old girl and get aroused. And you're telling me that you're just going to throw your little girl out there for views and clicks when the people who are watching her, she is being sexualized. If your child is online, there is somebody watching who is sexualizing your child in some way. And it's not a if or when, it's a they are. And it's a pill every parent needs to swallow at this point because it's only going to get worse.
Amen. And I could not agree more. And I'm excited to have you back on again to dive more into this because there's so much that we can go into regarding the momfluencers, the young teenagers that are getting handed accounts online, that are starting social media accounts, that are finding themselves in the midst of groomers and not knowing that they're grooming them, just like how you didn't. There's just so much misconception around abuse and trauma that we're not told. And the fact is, online makes it so much easier for these people. They don't have to leave their home and abduct a child anymore. They don't have to physically go and try to groom somebody or get in somehow with the child or the teenager or the young woman. They can just literally go on social media, create an account, and start communicating them, just like how your groomer did. So I'm really,
Yeah,
really
and the other thing I'm seeing now, sorry, the other thing I'm seeing now too, I want to bring up is there are a lot of companies who are now claiming to be agents for influencers. So I think that's going to be the new thing we start seeing is people who do have accounts they're trying to grow. I think they're going to start getting messages from these people who are going to be like, "Oh, I can help your page. I can get you better collabs. I can make you more money." And I think that's going to be a new avenue that people start using to get to these teens.
it's basically a duplication of what was done to you, except instead of it being offline, hey, sign this contract, we're going to hire you for this job, they can do the same exact thing on social media. Sign here, sign your rights away to this agency, and it's basically going to be the same exact thing that you went through.
Yeah, and it's
Oh,
going to keep going until more of us women who've gone through this start talking. And it's not easy to talk about because, again, like at the end of the day, I did submit and I feel a lot of shame and guilt around that. And I held on to that for a very, very long time, until about 2022 when I started seeing a therapist who asked me about like how I got into it and what led up to it. And she was, again, she was one of the first people who were like, she was like, she's like, you were trafficked into this. And I'm like, no, I went and did it. She's like, would you have done this if you didn't meet that woman? She's like, would you have ever been in this? And I'm like, no, God, no. I'm like, I didn't even know existed. Like the only thing I knew before getting into this was like Skinemax, soft course stuff. Like I didn't even know people did this or there were websites for this. Like I was so naive to that world entirely. And it was nothing I ever looked up. I was never into it. Like I was not somebody who was like sexual with myself. You know, I didn't have that. Like sex was never a pleasure thing for me because of everything I had gone through. So I didn't have that desire to like ever need to find porn or anything. And so I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know this was a thing until I walked into it and I was like, oh, what am I doing? And I think, you know, anyone takes anything from this, it's that just because a woman does submit doesn't mean they were, you know, they're not a victim of it. Like I think there's a lot of women who submit to survive. And I guarantee 90% of those women have never shared their story because they know they eventually let it happen. And there is a lot of shame and there is a lot of guilt around that. And you're like, well, you know, I eventually did it, right? And having that, you're like, okay, like what do I do now? Like I didn't punch him in the face. Like I, you know, and it's just something so many women I think hold onto and don't ever talk about and don't ever bring up. And I will say, since sharing my story on Instagram, you know, there are a lot of women who have reached out to me who have told me their story for the first time, who were like, I feel like I can tell you and you're not going to judge me. And because a lot of women are like, I didn't fight, so I don't feel like I have a voice.
yeah.
And I really hope more women start understanding that just because you didn't throw a punch or scream or kick doesn't mean your story isn't valid. And I really hope women start coming forward more and, you know, talking about the fact that a lot of women are pressured into situations that they don't want to be in. And then they're held with all this shame and guilt because, again, they're like, I did it. So I can't say anything.
And you're doing such an incredible job bringing awareness to that. And I'd like to share your Instagram page. Would you be able to tell people where they can find you? And I'll share it on the screen. That way people can come follow your journey.
Yeah. So it's at that dang Rachel.
I love them.
um, and, you know, I'm kind of just posting as I go, telling my story, but then I'm also trying to do a lot of education about social media, the grooming, how to protect our kids from ending up in the same situation I did. And I'm also showcasing a lot of analytics that I'm finding on social media, um, around how, you know, in the rare occasion I did post one of my children, the demographic it was getting pushed to through the algorithm is mostly men versus a post with just me and, my guy in it, which was getting pushed to mostly women. And I found that really interesting. And, at the end of the day, like if I do have a high views from men on a post with my children, it doesn't mean all those men are bad. But knowing what I know, I do know there is a percentage of men on there that I don't want looking at my kids. And that's a reality we all have to start acknowledging and facing. And it's not a fun one, but our children aren't safe to be publicly put out there anymore. Like they're just, I mean, they never were, but even more so now.
And I love seeing the following that you're getting, and that with these posts, you're getting such high engagement. It's like, what an amazing time that we live in, that people are willing to listen to this now, when before it was always written off as more conspiratorial, or I just don't want to look at it, or because the news isn't covering it, it's not real for me, and we forget that these crimes exist not in just the ghettos of big cities, not in third world countries. This is happening on social media. This is happening in our communities. This is happening at places like the Playboy Mansion. We have a completely twisted perspective on what trafficking and organized crime against humans and children could look like when it comes to these different trafficking situations. And so thank you, Rachel, for all the work that you're doing. It's not easy making that decision to put your face out there. And I'm sure to some extent it's come with a cost, and hopefully the good has outweighed the negative, whatever the negative may be, and I'm just really grateful for it, because there is such a need for these conversations that you're having. And like I said, you're the first person that I've really come across that's been very loud about this consistently. And I couldn't think of a more important topic to affect generations to come. And I'm so grateful that it's you championing it. I couldn't think of a better role model for young girls to see than you.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm trying. I'm figuring it out one day at a time.
Well, I look forward to doing a part 2 with you. And for people listening, please leave comments for Rachel down in the comment box. Reach out to her on social media if you guys have questions and want to connect with her as well. And your DMs are open. You're communicating with people that way if they want to reach out, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I have a lot of women who have started telling me their stories and, different varieties of how they were trafficked. And there is there's so many different avenues of trafficking and how someone can get trafficked. And I think so many people have this idea of like the movie Taken, for example.
Yes.
And they think it's this like crazy hostage situation, but you don't realize the hostage situation is they take over you mentally. You are mentally their hostage, not physically. You can run anytime, but mentally, it's almost hard to explain how mentally trapped you are.
That's a really great analogy. And we'll dig more into some of these nuances. And I'm excited to pick your brain too about relationships, managing that after going through something like you did, parenting, what you've learned, advice for
a lot
other
of lessons learned there.
And even just more about online, how we can all be safer. This isn't just parents with kids that are targeted. This can be anybody, whether you have kids or not. Just being on social media, it's a breeding ground for predators to lurk. So I'm excited to have you back on, and I'll have your links in the show notes. Is there anything that you wanted to close with, or anything you wanted to say to survivors listening?
I think if I could say anything, it's that now there's no better time to be a survivor than right now. Like 10 years ago, I couldn't have told my story. I don't think it would have had the same reaction as it is right now. And so if I can encourage anyone, I would encourage everyone to start talking, because the more we talk and the more we educate, the more we can hopefully get towards some kind of solution or help, or at least educate people enough to where we stop giving these predators people to go after.
Thank you for that. And thank all of you on the other side of the screen for listening and supporting. I'm going to have all Rachel's information in the show notes. Go follow her on Instagram, DM her, go support her, share her content, engage, reach out, and just continue the work that all of you are doing on the other end to help support this movement. We couldn't do this without you. So with that, you guys, thank you so much for listening. Bless you all, and we will see you next time.